Hey guys, it's JackSquare. Over the past weekend, Wolf Godwin and I were doing some work here at the homestead, clearing a lot of land and burning a bunch of brush and having a fun time. And of course, we were having lots of great conversations. One of the topics that came up was if you were to take roles in a band and the instruments in a band and equate that to roles and classes in a D&D party, how would that work out? Now, I'm sure that other people have talked about this before, but this is my take on it. Just a couple things. One, I'm going with just as far as genre, a rock band. You could kind of take it in a couple different directions, but I'm kind of keeping it as a very wide genre, nothing too specific there. So just kind of a basic rock band. And for instrumentation, I'm working with a five-piece band. So we're thinking your front man being your rhythm guitarist and lead vocalist, lead guitar, bass, drums, and keys. That's actually the lineup that I have in my band, Saint Square. One other thing is I'm not really looking at the personality of maybe any particular musician or any particular character in D&D. I'm really more looking at the instrumentation and the function of certain classes in the game. So if you were to do maybe a different set of criteria there or work with some other specifics, and you might come up with something different than I did, but this is what I came up with kind of working inside those parameters. So first off, with our frontman being the rhythm guitarist and lead vocalist, well, that's someone who's got to be out there in front leading the band. They've got to have a lot of engagement with the crowd. And then, of course, if things start to go sideways, they need to be able to reel it back in and really direct things and make sure they're, driving things forward. In my mind, this would be a paladin, because a paladin needs to be highly charismatic. They're going to be out there in front, smiting things with the might of their god. And of course, if things start to go awry, well, they have some buffs and maybe even some healing abilities to keep things together and help everybody out. And again, push things forward. In my mind, that makes a lot of sense. Moving on to the bass and the drums. And in fact, let's take the drums first. With drums, I like to tell people that drums are maybe not the most important piece in a band, but they're without a doubt the most powerful piece. If you have a bad drummer, go home, quit. It's over. It's going to sound really, really bad. But if you have a good drummer, you can have an otherwise mediocre band and things are going to sound pretty darn good. And this is because, of course, the drummer controls the beat and they help glue everybody together, keeping the whole team together there, right? And because of this, I would equate a drummer to a fighter, specifically a shield-based fighter, somebody that can offer lots of protection and really be the backbone of the team in the same way that the drummer is of the band. You ever notice how on a stage everybody groups around the drummer? And that's because even with monitors and things, you want to be close to that sound. It really helps pull everything together. With the bass is responsible for keeping the rhythm of the song. If you don't know a song and want to feel the chord changes, listen to the bass. You can always tell when the chord is getting ready to change based on what the bass player is playing. The bass player is also able to, more than anyone else, pull things back on track. If things are starting to get towards a train wreck, they can hit a cool riff and help glue things back together. It's also a very supportive role. Even for bass players that play a lot of solos and things, they are 90% of the time just playing a basic bass line, or at least that's really what they should be doing. Even some of the more flashy bass players will tell you that. So because of that, I would think that a bass player would correlate to a cleric. Now you think about it, a cleric is going to be someone who's in a very supportive role. They're helping everyone out. They're helping to, especially right there with the fighter, keep everyone on track and make sure that everything is going okay. And if someone needs some help, they're going to be the one to help them out. Another thing that's interesting about the bass player and the cleric is the fact that in a lot of bands, and obviously this is not the case all the time, but in a lot of bands, a lot of people do not want to be the bass player. If somebody's going to be starting a garage band or something like that, it's like, hey, we've got 4 guitar players, you're the worst, you play bass. And it's kind of unfortunate that it works out that way. And on the flip side of that, if you have someone that is a dedicated bass player and they're really good, they can join any band that they want to because bass players are in such high demand. And this is because it's not a flashy role. You've got the lead guitar player out there, you've got the lead vocalist, going crazy and everything, but the bass player is holding down the fort, really helping everybody out. And I think it works the same way with healers. You even think beyond D&D to things like Overwatch, or other games like that, where not everyone wants to play the healer, but when you get a dedicated healer, it's a fantastic benefit to the rest of the team. Same thing with D&D. And because of that, I think that's kind of the nail in the coffin that says bass player is probably the cleric. Now, moving on to the lead guitar player, this has got to be a striker, specifically a ranger, and I would think a bow and arrow ranger. You think about it, they're going to be able to reach out and deal lots of damage in the same way that a lead guitar player is going to say, oh, well, here's this little riff or lick or lead line or a full-blown guitar solo, and it just jumps into the song, takes things over, and then right back out. And that seems to make sense to me. In that same vein, if we look at it, we say, okay, we've got a leader, we've got a fighter, a healer, and a striker. Well, what do we need next? We need a controller, and that is going to be the keyboard player. And so the keyboard player is definitely going to correlate to a wizard. Now, this makes a lot of sense to me because if you look at the keyboard player, you have more notes than anyone else, 88 keys right there. If you're working with a full-size keyboard, you have more sounds than anyone else to work with, and you might even prepare some sounds, kind of like you're preparing some spells, right, for the gig. And when you look at it like that, it seems to me that that would be the wizard. You've got so many tricks up your sleeve, you can do all this different stuff, and it's neat because it does work well with the idea of the lead guitarist striker or bow and arrow ranger, that both of those are kind of sitting in the background, not necessarily carrying the song or carrying the whole thing, but they're reaching out and dealing, again, lots of damage. So this makes a lot of sense to me. This is kind of the way that I've been thinking about it. And just to recap that there, we're looking for our leader. Well, that's going to be our frontman, rhythm guitarist / vocalist as a paladin. For our fighter, that's going to be the drummer as a shield fighter. And for our healer, that's the bass player as a cleric. For our striker, that's going to be our lead guitar player as a bow and arrow ranger. And finally, for our controller, we're looking at the keyboard player as the wizard. Now, of course, like I said at the beginning of the video, if you're taking this in some different directions, I could see maybe some other conclusions. If it's a more thrashy sort of band, then maybe your drummer's more like a barbarian, or if it's something a little bit more jazzy, then maybe your lead guitar player is going to be more like a really charismatic rogue or something. And if you're playing, say, something that's more orchestrated, maybe your keyboard player is more like a warlock. But for this kind of generic classic rock band, I'm going with very classic classes here. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Does this make sense to you, or would you make other comparisons? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you next time.